Hello everyone. Today we are going to discuss the poem Ode to the West Wind by Percy Bysshe Shelley. Ode to the West Wind is an ode, as the title suggests, and it was written by P.B. Shelley. It was composed by Shelley in 1819 while he was visiting Italy. Shelley was a strong and influential poet of the Romantic movement in Western literature. He was born in England in 1792 and he died by drowning in 1822 off the coast of Italy at the age of 30. In his poetry, he examined nature as well as human condition. Ode to the West Wind is an ode, and though it was written by Shelley in 1819 in Cassine Wood near Florence, Italy, it was published in 1820 by Charles in London as a part of the collection Prometheus Unbound, a lyrical drama in 4 acts with some other poems. Shelley wanted his message of reform and revolution to be spread, and he makes the wind his messenger. In fact, the wind becomes the trope for spreading the word of change through the poet-prophet figure. Some people believe that this poem was written in response to the personal loss, the loss of his son William, who was born to Mary Shelley in 1819. This had pained Shelley, and his pain influenced him in writing the poem. The poem allegorizes the role of the poet as a voice of change as well as revolution. When Shelley composed this poem, without doubt one can say that he had the Peterloo massacre of August 1819 in mind. His other poems also written during that time, that is The Mask of Anarchy, Prometheus Unbound, and England 1819, also take up the same themes of political change, revolution, as well as the role of a poet. We know that Shelley was one of the romantic poets of the early 19th century, and he is also considered one of England's finest lyric poets. He was a revolutionary and an idealist, and much of his poetry is written in expression of his own desire for a better governed world, a world governed by justice and also inhabited by free men and women. Though Shelley was little understood in his own lifetime, he spent his last years in Italy, and where he died by drowning at a very small age. Shelley was a poet of the second generation of English Romantics, and he wrote this ode shortly after the Peterloo massacre, in which the royal soldiers attacked and killed working people who were protesting at a rally in St. Peter's Field area of Manchester. As we know, the poem is also followed shortly after some of Shelley's own personal terrible losses, together with other works written in 1819 such as Sonnet, England in 1819, and Song of the Men of England. Ode to the West Wind established Shelley's reputation as a radical thinker. Ode to the West Wind shows Shelley's idealism. It also shows that he was a revolutionary. It shows that Shelley was dissatisfied with the existing order and he rebelled against political tyranny, orthodox religion, because the war had made life of mankind very unhappy and miserable during his time. So Shelley sought to liberate mankind from the shackles of political, religious, as well as intellectual slavery. This is very evident in the Ode to the West Wind. Shelley also believed in the perfectibility of human nature, and he expresses it in Ode to the West Wind. Ode to the West Wind is a rhymed lyric. It is in the form of an address and has a dignified subject, feeling, and style. It is an elaborately structured poem and has musicality in it. Ode to the West Wind is divided into 5 parts. Each contains 5 stanzas, 4 3-line stanzas and 2-line couplet. All are metered in iambic pentameter. The rhyme scheme of each part follows a pattern known as the terza rima, the 3-line rhyme scheme which was employed by Dante in his Divine Comedy. In the 3-line terza rima stanza, the first and third lines rhyme, and the middle line does not. Then the end sound of the middle line is employed as the rhyme of the first and the third lines. So we see that in Ode to the West Wind, Shelley employs a poetic structure of 5 cantos with 4 tercets each. A tercet is 3 lines of verse, and the third line of each tercet allows for change in the direction of the poet's thought. Here, at the end of each canto, we see a rhyming couplet that allows the passionate urgency of the poet's words to gain strength as the poet tries to merge his essence with that of the driving west wind. Shelley's west wind is wild, proud, untamed wind, and it forms his personal emblem. It forms a perfect symbol for and the impetuous agent for radical social change. So we see that the structure of Ode to the West Wind is quite complex. Each of the 5 stanzas is itself a terza rima sonnet. A sonnet which consists of 14 lines divided into 4 triplets and a concluding couplet. But though the structure is complex, the interlocking rhyme scheme of terza rimo is used by Shelley to give the poem a very strong sense of rhythm. This form also gives emphasis to the concluding couplet in each stanza, and therefore it focuses the reader's attention on the final line or the 2 lines. The effect that Shelley achieves is important, for he wishes to emphasize in the first 3 stanzas the speaker's plea that the west wind should listen to him, and in the final stanza he wishes to bring forth or highlight the significant rhetorical question with which the poem ends. The most important or primary literary trope in this ode is personification. Shelley again and again repeatedly addresses the west wind as if it were an animate, intelligent being. He wishes his readers to consider the west wind as a living force, a force that helps to shape the landscape, literally the physical landscape and metaphorically the landscape of human minds and attitudes. Shelley uses three major images in the poem: the wave, the leaf, and the cloud. He uses these images to show the ways in which the west wind treats elements of physical landscape. In a few short lines in each of the first three stanzas, what he does is to depict the effects of the fierce autumn wind on the ocean, on the earth, and the sky. In the fourth stanza, he applies these descriptions to himself, calling on the west wind to work its magic on him, that is, on the poet himself, in the same way as it does in the natural world, so that he too will die only to rise again and give life, that is, intellectual life. In the fourth stanza, Shelley uses the most striking image. He describes the poet's present plight and he writes that I fall upon the thorns of life, I bleed. Thus he urges the west wind in a single line that he be made like the wave, the leaf, or the cloud, so that he can also be transformed by the powers of the wind. Thus we see that Shelley addresses the west wind as a force of death as well as decay. But he welcomes this death and decay because he considers that rejuvenation and rebirth only comes after death and decay. A first person persona in the poem, the west wind addresses the west wind in the 5 stanzas. It considers the wind to be strong and fearsome. In the first stanza, the wind blows the leaves of autumn. In the second stanza, we see that the wind blows the clouds in the sky. In the third stanza, we observe the wind blows across the island and the waves of the sea. In the fourth stanza, Shelley imagines being the leaf, cloud, or wave, sharing the wind's strength. He desires to be lifted up rather than caught low on the thorns of life, for he sees himself like the wind, tameless and swift and proud. In the final stanza, that is the 5th stanza, he asks the wind to play upon him like a lyre. He wishes to share the wind's fierce spirit. He says that in turn he would have the power to spread his words throughout the world and help in reawakening the world. So this was an introduction to Ode to the West Wind. Thank you. Hello everyone. Today we are going to discuss and analyze the poem Ode to the West Wind by P.B. Shelley. In this ode, Shelley focuses his attention not on the fruitfulness of the season but on the destructive aspects of nature. He starts talking about those aspects of autumn which presage the death of the year and also the bleakness of winter. He begins by personifying the west wind. He addresses it as, "O wild west wind." He calls the west wind wild. Wild because it is uncontrollable and brings about destruction. Thou breath of autumn's being. He calls the west wind as the breath of autumn's being. He says that the existence of autumn depends upon the west wind. The season of autumn breathes because of the west wind. This season is alive because of the wildness of the west wind. Now, all of us know that the season of autumn is known for its bleakness, that is, the barrenness which it brings. The wind sweeps and there is a bleak landscape. That is, this season of autumn is lacking in warmth, lacking in life or kindliness. This season is not at all encouraging and not hopeful too. So we see further he writes that thou from whose unseen presence the leaves dead are driven. Thou stands for the west wind. Thou, you west wind, from whose unseen presence you cannot be seen, and from your unseen presence the dead leaves, the dried leaves are driven. They are driven away like ghosts from an enchanter fleeing. Like the ghosts, the leaves fly away as if they are afraid of the magician, like ghosts who are afraid of the magician, and they start moving away from that place. The west wind carries away the dead leaves as if the dead leaves are flying away from the magician. All of us know that autumn, the season of autumn, begins by the days start getting colder and the tree starts shedding their leaves. The leaves dry up in this season. They change their color from green to red, orange, yellow and even brown just before they fall down. So there is less sunlight also in this season, and there is less warmth in this season because the days also start getting shorter. There is less sunlight. The seasons, all of you know, are defined as spring, which begins from March, April and May. Summer from June, July, August. Autumn begins in September, October and ends in November. Then winter begins in December, January and February. And every country experiences different seasons according to its geographical location. In the season of autumn, the nights start becoming longer. The temperature starts falling and we start feeling cooler. Now in the spring season, the reverse of autumn happens. Though Shelley focuses by beginning his poem on the fruitfulness of the season of autumn, but his aim is to look beyond this bleakness brought about by autumn to the awakening that is to come in the spring season, the season which comes after the winters, and the melancholy, the sadness which he expresses, he himself sweeps aside in the end of the poem and ends the poem with a note of hope. He says that spring will come after winter. So we see that this poem is an expression of the poem's longing for such power as the west wind possesses. He begins the poem with the autumn and ends it with hopefulness in the season of spring. In the spring season, we see that the reverse of autumn happens. The weather starts turning warmer, the trees start growing their leaves, and the plants also start growing new flowers. Young animals like chicks and lambs are also born. In summers, the weather is usually warm. The trees also have full grown green leaves. The day is also longer. The flowers bloom, so everyone is filled with happiness. The spring's warmer weather and the increased light during the day hours makes it the best season. We can take long walks and see flowers blooming. This makes spring a very welcome season, a season of rebirth and rejuvenation. That is the opposite of what happens in autumn. The flowers and the trees, everything is in its bloom during the spring season. We can see nature blooming and sprouting before our own eyes. So, the spring marks an end of the winter season and the beginning of summer season, a beginning of warmth and hopefulness. Thus, we see that Shelley deals with the themes of death and rebirth in his poem The Ode to the West Wind. From the very beginning in the West Wind, he describes the West Wind as a very powerful and destructive wind, as it takes away the summer and brings winter. Winter is a season which is usually associated with death and sorrow. So he says that the wind does not bring peace. But still he says in the end that he celebrates this wind because it is necessary for the circle of life. It is necessary for progress and rebirth, because without death there will be no rebirth. Therefore, he says that the wind serves as an important role in preserving. So, in the beginning lines, O wild west wind, thou breath of autumn's being, we come to know that he speaks to the wind as though it were a person. He calls the wind the breath of autumn's being. Thus, he personifies the wind once again by giving it the human quality of having breath. And then he describes the west wind as having an unseen presence. We cannot see the wind, which makes it seem as though the author, the poet Shelley, personifies the wind and considers it as a sort of god or a spiritual being. We cannot see God or a spiritual being. The last line of this stanza specifically refers to the wind as though it is a spiritual being which drives away death and ghosts. It is a characteristic simile. The immaterial wind is compared to the material enchanter or a magician, and the material leaves, that is, which have a physical existence, those leaves are considered to be immaterial ghosts. In the second stanza, fourth line or the first line of the second stanza, Shelley writes, yellow and black and pale and hectic red, pestilence-stricken multitudes, O thou, O you, that is the west wind, O you west wind, who chariotest to the dark wintry bed. Yellow, black, pale and hectic, that is unhealthy, red, are the colors of the leaves. So in this stanza, he describes the dead autumn leaves. They are not painted as colorful and beautiful, but they rather symbolize death and disease. The poet describes these colors, yellow, black and red, which are associated with death, and hectic red is a color which reminds us of blood and sickness. Now Shelley describes the dead and dying leaves as pestilence-stricken multitudes. They are in quite a lot of numbers, and they appear to be pestilence stricken, struck by pestilence. This is not at all a beautiful description of the fall or autumn leaves. The speaker or the poet appears to see autumn leaves as a symbol of dead, sick, and the dying. The west wind then comes along like having a chariot, and it carries away the leaves to the dark wintry bed. Now this wintry bed is a symbol of the grave. The west wind comes and carries these leaves far away and buries them in the bed, that is the earth. The leaves appear to be struck by an epidemic. Pestilence can be any fatal disease which spreads quickly and also kills a large number of people. It is a contagious or an infectious epidemic disease like we are having corona in the present times. It is very virulent and devastating, something that destroys or kills a large number of people. Thank you. Hello everyone. We'll now discuss stanza 3rd, 4th and 5th of the first canto of Ode to the West Wind by P.B. Shelley. We have already discussed the first and second stanza. Now we shall begin with the third stanza. In the third stanza, Shelley writes, "The winged seeds, where they lie, cold and low, each like a corpse within its grave, until thine azure sister of the spring shall blow." So Shelley writes that the winged seeds, where they lie cold and slow. We will see this in continuation with the 6th line. O thou west wind, who chariotist carries them in its chariot to the dark wintry bed, the winged seeds. The west wind takes away the winged seeds to there and buries them below the dark wintry bed as if they were buried in a grave. The winged seeds. Some of the seeds have wings or wings-like growth structures. This is an adaptation of nature for the purpose of dispersal of seeds. This enables the seeds to be carried away to far off places where they can grow, and far off distances they are carried to far off distances by the wind. So such seeds which have wings and even others are carried away by the west wind, where they lie cold and low. They're cold because the season is cold, and low because they are buried under the ground. Now each like a corpse within its grave. Shelley writes that each seed lies like a corpse. Corpse means a dead body which is lying in its grave. So the seeds are buried under the earth as if they are buried underground. Until thine azure sister of the spring, he says that these seeds keep lying underground until thine means the west winds, thine, yours. He says that until the azure sister, azure stands for blue color, the blue sister of the west wind is the wind which blows during the spring season. So until the wind of the spring season shall blow her clarion or trumpet. These seeds will keep lying buried under the ground. In the second stanza, we see how Shelley explains how the west wind carries the dead and dried leaves. In the third stanza, we see how it carries away the seeds which have wings and it buries them. So we see that in the third stanza, the poet continues the metaphor of the leaves as the dead by explaining that the west wind takes them away, that is, the takes or carries the dried leaves away as well as the winged seeds to their graves, to the graves of these seeds where they are buried cold and low below the ground. Next, he uses a simile to compare every leaf to a dead body or a corpse which is lying within its grave. The poet now says that each seed is like a dead body and it will lie there until the wind will come and taking away the dead, but though the wind carries away the dead leaves, but it brings new life because now new plants will come out of the seeds which are buried underground. Shelley uses the word azure. Azure means blue in order to describe the wind. That is, this color is in sharp contrast to the colors used to describe the leaves because this wind is associated with the spring season. The wind which blows during the spring season is the warm west wind of the spring. So, the epithet azure refers to the blue skied regions, the places, areas from where this wind comes, that is, this wind blows. We see that a characteristic feature of these lines is that the rich and quickly changing metaphors. There are a number of metaphors: chariotist, bed, winged, lie cold and low, blow her clarion, dreaming, driving sweet buds like flocks, living. These follow one another in a very quick succession, and still, though they make a unified impression, we feel that the poem is one long sentence with long parenthetical asides. Continuing from the fourth stanza, from the third stanza, the poet continues to rhyme, "Thine azure sister of the spring shall blow her clarion over the dreaming earth." That is, the azure sister or blue sister of the spring will blow her clarion or trumpet in order to awaken the seeds over the dreaming earth. The earth is dreaming or the earth is sleeping, that is, the seeds are lying buried under the earth. So the wind which flows during the spring season blows its carrion and wakes up the seeds. This happens only when the winds during the spring season start blowing. So till then, the seeds remain buried under the ground. So blow her clarion, the spring shall blow her clarion, indicates that it is like an angel blowing its trumpet in order to wake the dead people on the day of judgment. So in bracket he writes, driving sweet buds like flocks to feed in air. So this wind during the spring season drives sweet buds like flocks to feed in the air. These buds feed in the air. A number of flowers bud and bloom, and it appears as though they are feeding in the air. With living hues and odors, plain and hill, he says that the west wind drives away death, buries the dead, and also brings new life. It brings living colors, beautiful colors, and odors and smell of the flowers on plains as well as hills on the earth. In the fifth stanza, which is a couplet that is has two lines, Shelley writes, wild spirit, which art moving everywhere, destroyer and preserver, hear, O hear. He addresses the west wind as a wild spirit. Wild, which is uncontrollable and destroys things, nobody can control it. And he calls it a spirit also. Now he has started considering the west wind as a spirit, that is, which someone who has spiritual powers. And he says, which art moving everywhere, which is moving everywhere. He says that the west wind is like a wild spirit which is going around everywhere in the whole world. Then he says, destroyer and preserver, hear, O hear. He calls the west wind as a destroyer as well as a preserver. He calls the west wind as a destroyer because the west wind destroys the leaves. And then he calls the west wind a preserver too. The west wind is a preserver because it preserves the seeds. The seeds are preserved underground, from where they may come to life again in the spring season, which just comes after the autumn season. The stanza ends with hear, O hear. That is, the poet appeals to the wind, the west wind, whom he calls a wild spirit, to listen to him. So, he views the west wind as a spiritual being who destroys as well as creates life. So, he asks the spirit to listen to his plea. Though in this stanza he does not make a specific plea or a specific request to the wind that what he wishes out of the wind, but it is clear from this stanza that he views the west wind as a very powerful spiritual being that can listen to him and make his dreams come true or fulfill his dreams. Thus, we see that in this cantos of Ode to the West Wind, Shelley refers to the west wind as the breath of autumn and also a magician, a transformer in and the world, and an invisible enchanter from whom the ghostly or dead leaves scurry or run away. Shelley also speaks of the autumn leaves as pestilence-stricken multitudes, and that the great powerful wind blows them to the dark wintry bed or graves. He finds these intermixed with these leaves the seeds, the winged seeds that will soon be awakened from their death like sleep under the ground, by the azure sister of the spring, and this wind from the warm south during the spring will open up the buds whose flowers feed on the sweet springtime air, as if they were a flock of sheep which feeds on pasture or green grasslands. In the end, in the couplet, the poet calls out to praise the wildness of the west wind, and he calls it a destroyer as well as a preserver. He sees the west wind as the force that must listen to his cry also for the transformation of the world, for the transformation of the society, and it is his cry which he had made more directly in his other poems like Sonnet, England in 1819. But in Ode to the West Wind, Shelley oxymoronically portrays the wind as something that at once preserves the world from destruction and destroys the existing order, that is, waging war against humanity. Thank you. Hello everyone. Ode to the West Wind by Shelley. We are going to discuss the second part of Ode to the West Wind. In the first stanza of the second part, Shelley writes, "Thou on whose stream, mid the steep sky's commotion, thou, O you west wind, on whose stream, on whose current, mid the steep sky's commotion." Amidst the steep sky's commotion, there is a commotion in the sky, there is a storm in the sky because of the west wind. Now we see here that the trees and the leaves which were actual or physical in the previous stanza, they are all now metaphorical. And in this way, Shelley has tried to connect the two stanzas, which are bound to be closer together in this manner. So in the previous stanza or in the first part, Shelley had described the activities of the west wind on land. In this stanza, he will describe the activities of west wind in the sky. On the land, the west wind drives the dead leaves of various colors, yellow, black, pale and red, which are scattered, and the winged seeds also are scattered far and wide by the west wind. It buries the leaves and the seeds under the earth, as if they were dead bodies, and it buries them like dead bodies in their graves until the spring comes. Then they sprout and bear flowers and fill the valley with their sweet fragrance. So west wind is depicted as a destroyer of the dead leaves and preserver of the seeds which are buried underground. In this stanza, the west wind is active in the air, in the sky. And so Shelley continues writing, "Thou on whose stream, mid the steep sky's commotion, loose clouds, like earth's decaying leaves, are shed." The steep sky's commotion means as though the west wind was a storm in the forest of the sky that had caused the loose clouds to be shed like leaves from trees. The sky is said to be steep because of the height of the sky, it is very high. So he says that the loose clouds fall down from the sky as if the trees are shedding their leaves. Shook from the tangled boughs of heaven and ocean, When we shake a tree, the branches of a tree, the leaves and the flowers fall down. Similarly, he says that the clouds are coming down from the sky as if someone has shook the tangled boughs, the tangled or interwoven branches of heaven and ocean. Then he writes, Angels of rain and lightning, there are spread on the blue surface of thine airy surge. He says that angels of rain and lightning, angels here stands for the foretellers who can, or the precursors who can tell in advance about the future. He says that foretellers of rain and lightning are spread on the blue surface of the west wind, on thine airy surge, on your airy or forward motion. We can see the foretellers or the angels who announce that rain and lightning are going to happen. Like the bright hair uplifted from the head of some fierce Maenad, even from the dim verge of the horizon to the zenith's height, the locks of the approaching storm. So, Shelley says that Shelley introduces a new image. He says that loose cloudlets are like the uplifted hair of some frenzied devotees of Bacchus, Bacchus of the god of wine. Maenad is literally a frenzied woman. Maenads were frenzied votaries of Dionysus or Bacchus. They were strangely attired and they indulged in wild dances. So, in the beginning, we see that Shelley again addresses the west wind as a person. He begins by saying, thou, you, on whose stream, mid the steep sky's commotion, he calls the wind as one who will loose the clouds and shake the leaves of the boughs or branches of heaven and ocean. Then he continues by saying that angels of rain and lightning there are spread on the blue surface of thine airy surge. Again he refers to the wind as a spiritual being who is more powerful than angels, because the angels of rain and lightning are described as being spread on the blue surface of the wind. Shelley then describes these angels like the bright hair on the head of an even greater being. In the 17th line, Shelley uses tangled boughs of heaven and earth. He conveys the meaning that the horizon is indistinguishable. It is indistinguishable because of the clouds which stretch from the horizon to the zenith, and therefore the sky and sea are described as trees with their branches which are intermingled or meshed together. Then he compares the wind to a fierce Maenad, or the spiritual being that used to be found around the Greek god Dionysus. And this being that was also described as having hair like angels. Thus, the poet describes the wind as a being like a god with angels of hair. These angels of rain and lightning reveal that the storm is on the way. So, continuing his awe or wonder concerning the might of the west wind, Shelley hails the west wind as a creator of clouds and a living stream in the sky, a stream that moves the trees of heaven as well as of the ocean. Then he gives us a vision of angels, angels that flow with the wind, and that in his simile they are like the bright hair streaming from the head of some fierce Maenad. So Shelley takes us to the height of the skies and then to the distant horizon, where we see the locks of the approaching storm. He conveys the idea that a storm will come which will bring about changes on the earth. Thus, we see that in the first two cantos, Shelley praises the power of the wind, the might of the wind, and gives a number of similes, metaphors, and allusions, just in order to show what the wind can do, how powerful the wind is. So, the wind can loosen, the wind can spread, the wind can shed, the wind can burst. We shall continue with stanza 5th and 6th of Canto 2 of in part 4 of Shelley's Ode to the West Wind. Hello everyone. We are going to analyze stanza 4 and 5 of Canto 2 of P.B. Shelley's Ode to the West Wind. Shelley writes, "Thou dirge of the dying year." He again addresses the west wind and calls it as thou, you dirge of the dying year. He says that the west wind is the funeral song of the dying year. It is an image, and he says that the sound of the west wind becomes the funeral chant of the expiring year or the year which is coming to an end. He further writes, "Thou dirge of the dying year, to which this closing night, this coming night, will be the dome of a vast sepulchre, will become the dome of a very vast tomb for the burial of the dying year. Vaulted with all thy congregated might, the roof of this tomb will be built by the collected might of the vapors, of the clouds." So Shelley says that the storm which is approaching is the impending doom of the dying year. He uses the word sepulchre. Sepulchre refers to a small room or a monument in which a person is buried. He says that the congregated might, the collected power, or the terrifying mass of clouds will form the vaulted arched roof of the tomb, of the vast tomb of the dying year. Vaulted with the congregated might of vapors, from whose solid atmosphere, from whose compact mass of clouds, black rain and fire and hail will burst. Oh, here he says that from this compact mass, black rain and fire, that is lightning, and hail, that is frozen raindrops or balls, will burst out. So we see that in the first stanza, the west wind is described as a destroyer and preserver. But here, in the second stanza, it is described only as a destroyer. He describes the west wind as one which brings about death and destruction. He has already described it as a destroyer in the first canto. Here again he describes it as one who brings about black rain and fire and hail, that is, destroys everything. In the end of this canto, he again appeals to the wind, begging it to hear, to listen to him by saying, "Hear, O hear." Thus, we see that at the end of Canto 1, stanza 4, and the beginning of the ending, rhyming couplet, the term dirge is used by Shelley. Shelley here describes the stormy wing which signals the demise or death of the old year. And he says that this wind is melancholy as it will create the dome of a vast sepulchre. This sepulchre will have as its ceiling vaulting a host of vapors from whose seeming solidity a rain of darkness and hail will explode, as once again a pleading voice in a pleading voice he cries out to the wind to listen to him, and he also urges for people to heed what is foretold. O hear. Shelley, as a prophet, announces the end of an old dehumanizing order in the world and the beginning of a new order. And according to him, this order will offer freedom to the oppressed people in the world. In this stanza, Shelley writes down how the west wind is active in the sky, in the air, and how it carries loose clouds as if they were dead leaves. He shows clouds floating with the west wind and considers them as messengers of rain and lightning. So, in a way, Shelley seems to be telling about the approaching storm of civil awareness. This stanza also describes west wind as the harbinger of the end or the song of the dying year. The death of the old year will bring the new year. So, the dying year announces the coming of the new year. Shelley thus illustrates the abstract qualities inherent in his poems. The west wind is shown as fierce and very strong. It blows the leaves of autumn. In the second stanza, the wind blows the clouds in the sky, and from this, its solid atmosphere or compact mass come out black rain and fire and hail, which are all destructive in nature. Shelley adores the power of the west wind. He also adores the grandeur of the west wind, and he wishes that revolutionary ideas could reach every corner of the universe. He uses the west wind to symbolize the power of nature and also of the imagination, which is inspired by nature. The poem Ode to the West Wind thus symbolizes the difficulties and challenges in life. The poem also motivates us to be strong mentally and physically and face all the challenges of life. It encourages us to become bold and strong, like the west wind. Though the west wind is regarded as a symbol of destruction in the poem because it is capable of destroying everything, still the poet welcomes it because until and unless there is destruction of everything that is old, new cannot take birth. New ideas cannot take birth until the old ideas are driven away. Shelley calls the west wind the dirge or funeral song of the dying year and also describes how it stirs up violent storms. But again, he implores west wind to listen to him, to hear him. In Canto 2, Shelley addresses the west wind, saying that the wind bears the clouds along with it, just like it moves the decaying leaves from the trees. He also says that the tangled boughs of heaven and earth, suggesting that the skies and the seas have boughs or branches like a tree. It is all as if nature is borne along by the west wind. Then he talks about the clouds, which are borne by the west wind, as if they were locks of hair on the head of some fierce Maenad or a devotee of Bacchus or a frenzied or an intoxicated woman. The Maenads were a group of women who followed god Dionysus in the classical myth. They are also sometimes known as the Bacchae, after Bacchus, the Latin name of Greek Dionysus. The Maenads' name literally translates as raving ones because they would drink and dance in a frenzy. This simile draws attention towards the raging, wild, destructive nature of the west wind, which heralds the approach of the wild storm. Hello everyone, we are going to analyze the third canto of Ode to the West Wind by P.B. Shelley. Shelley begins the third canto by addressing the west wind. He writes, "Thou who didst waken from his summer dreams, the blue Mediterranean." He tells the west wind that you have awakened the Mediterranean Sea from his summer dreams. He says that the Mediterranean Sea was sleeping in the summer and dreaming, and the west wind has awakened it. The blue Mediterranean, where he lay lulled by the coil of his crystalline streams. Coil here means murmur, though generally coil means a loud noise or tumult. So there is a suggestion by the word coil, that suggestion is of the wavy movement of the waters. Lulled by the coil of his crystalline streams. Crystalline streams means transparent currents of water. The coil, the murmuring sound of the transparent currents of the Mediterranean Sea, act as a lullaby which makes the Mediterranean Ocean sleep and dream, and he is awakened by the west wind. Beside a pumice isle in Bayes Bay, the Mediterranean Ocean is sleeping near a pumice island. Pumice is a type of lava. It is near the Bayes Bay. The Bayes Bay lies northwest of the Bay of Naples. Bayeux was also a fashionable resort of the Romans in ancient times. Beside a pumice isle in Bayes Bay, and saw in sleep old palaces and towers, quivering within the waves' intenser day. Shelley writes that the Mediterranean Ocean saw in his sleep old palaces and towers. These palaces and towers once stood majestically on the shore, but now they have been drowned, and he sees them quivering, shaking within the waves' intenser day. Intenser day stands for the bright reflections of the water, the bright reflection of the sun on the waters. When the waves begin in the ocean, the palaces and towers appear to be quivering or shaking. Intenser day stands for brighter light. Shelley here refers to the many partly submerged foundations of palaces and towers by the side of the bay. These seem to quiver in the movement and brilliance of the sunlit water, all overgrown with azure, moss, and flowers. All these are overgrown with blue mosses and flowers. He says that these flowers and mosses are so sweet that the sense faints picturing them. Even when we are picturing these mosses and flowers, we faint because they are so beautiful and we can smell them. Thou for those for whose path the Atlantic's level parts cleave themselves into chasms. Thou, he addresses the west wind and says that you, for whose path, to make a path for you, the Atlantic's level parts, the smooth waters of the Atlantic Ocean, cleave themselves, divide themselves into chasms or deep fissures, so that the west wind can flow through it, while far below the sea blooms and the oozy woods, which were the sapless foliage of the ocean. He says that the sea blooms or the vegetation which is below the ocean, and the oozy woods, the woods or plants from which water comes out, which were the sapless foliage of the ocean and which have the sapless foliage, flowers and leaves of the ocean are not filled with sap or liquid because there is no shortage of water in the ocean. This foliage, this vegetation of the below the ocean knows thy voice, knows the voice of the west wind. So as soon as they hear that the west wind is coming, the sound of the west wind or the noise made by the west wind, they suddenly grow grey with fear. They grow grey with fear of the west wind and tremble, and they start trembling out of fear and despoil themselves. They are so much afraid that they shed their leaves. Oh, here again he calls the west wind. He says that, oh, here, oh, listen to me, you west wind. Thus Shelley says that the west wind stirs the Mediterranean from his summer dreams and also cleaves the Atlantic Ocean into choppy chasms, making the sapless foliage of the ocean tremble with fear. And for a third time, he implores the west wind to listen to him. Shelley had said that The wind over the Mediterranean Sea was an inspiration for the poem. Recognizing the power of the west wind, the wind becomes a metaphor for nature's awe inspiring spirit by Shelley. So, in this third canto, Shelley shows the action of the west wind on water. It awakens the blue Mediterranean from its long sleep or inaction, where it is dreaming about the ruined palaces and towers which are submerged in water. And he says, once they stood majestically on its shores. On these ruins, the marine vegetation, mosses, and plants with flowers are now growing. The west wind also blows over the Atlantic in such a manner, a rebelling spirit, that the rising waves give way to this mighty west wind, and the vegetation on the bottom of the ocean trembles with fear and is uprooted. Shelley wishes to convey the idea that the turmoil in the ocean is representative of a revolution which is going on, or which is indeed afoot, in Europe. Shelley wishes to convey that the fear expressed by the powers of the ocean are in fact a representative of the fear felt by Earth's great and mighty, who will, out of fear, grow grey, like the plants in the ocean, the vegetation in the ocean, when the catastrophic change will finally come. In the first and second stanza too, Shelley had personified the west wind. Here in the third canto, he has personified the Mediterranean Sea too. In the first canto, he had expressed the destructive and constructive aspect of the west wind, and had called it as a destroyer as well as a preserver. In the second canto, he represented west wind as a destroyer. In the third canto, he has represented the power of the west wind, that how the ocean too trembles when the west wind blows. He gives the sea's reaction to the power of the west wind. At the first sight of the strong wind, the sea seems to cleave or divide into chasms, and the plantation within the ocean grows grey with fear. It trembles at the power of the wind. Thank you. Hello everyone. We are going to discuss the fourth canto of Ode to the West Wind by P.B. Shelley. In this canto, Shelley writes, "If I were a dead leaf, thou mightest bear; if I were a swift cloud, to fly with thee; a wave to pant beneath thy power, and share the impulse of thy strength, only less free than thou, O uncontrollable. If even I were as in my boyhood, and could be the comrade of thy wanderings over heaven, as then, when to outstrip thy sky speed scarce seemed a vision, I would never have striven as thus with thee in prayer in my sore need. O lift me as a wave, a leaf, a cloud. I fall upon the thorns of life, I bleed." we see that Shelley says that if he were a dead leaf that the wind could bear, or a cloud it could carry, or a wave it could push, or even if he were as a boy, the comrade of the winds wandering over heaven, then he would never have needed to pray to the wind and invoke its powers. He pleads to the wind to lift him as a wave, a leaf, a cloud. For though he is like the wind at heart, untamable and proud, he says that he is now chained and bowed with the weight of his hours upon earth. Shelley begins by saying that if I were a dead leaf, he imagines that if he were like a dead leaf, thou mightest bear, thou you. He addresses the west wind, he personifies the west wind and speaks to it and says that if I were a dead leaf which the wind would bear, if I were a swift cloud to fly with thee. He again imagines himself as a swift cloud which would fly with the west wind. And again he says, if I were a wave to pant beneath the power of the west wind and share the impulse of thy strength. He wishes to share the impulse, the impetus, the push or the sudden thirst of the strength of the west wind. Only less free than thou. He says that he is not so free as the west wind. He is less free, he has less freedom than the west wind. West wind is free to flow anywhere. But the poet says that he has restrictions in life. O uncontrollable. He calls the west wind as uncontrollable. No one has control over the west wind. The west wind flows with a very high speed anywhere and no one can control it. It is very powerful. No one can stop the west wind. If even I were as in my boyhood, he says that if I were a person as I was in my boyhood, and could be the comrade of thy wanderings over heaven, and I could accompany you while you were wandering in heaven. Heaven here stands for the sky, while the west wind was flowing in the sky, and the writer, the poet, as a boy, could accompany it. As then, when to outstrip thy sky speed scarce seemed a vision. He says that when he was a boy, he imagined that he could fly with a greater speed than the west wind, and outstripping the west wind did not seem to him to be a vision or a mere imaginary thing. He really believed as a boy that he could run faster than the west wind. So he says that as a boy he could imagine all these things, but now as an adult he sees that all those things were a vision. I would never have striven as thus with thee in prayer in my sore need. He says that today the poet, he himself, is in sore need, is in utmost need. He needs the courage of the and the power of the west wind, and he would never have prayed as he is praying now to the west wind, to listen to him, to hear his plea, And his plea now comes. He says that he urges the west wind, "Oh, lift me as a wave." He wishes the west wind to lift him as it lifts the waves of the oceans. Again he says that, "Oh, lift me as a leaf," like the west wind carries away all the leaves. "Or lift me as a wave, a leaf, a cloud." Again he urges the west wind to lift him as a cloud. We have seen in the first 3 cantos how the west wind lifts a leaf and carries it away as if in a chariot, how the west wind lifts the clouds as well as it lifts the waves in the oceans. Similarly, the poet wishes the west wind to lift him. "I fall upon the thorns of life, I bleed." The poet wishes the west wind to lift him because he is falling upon the thorns of life and he is bleeding. The thorns of life are the difficulties of his life, the sorrows in his life, and he says that I am so sorrowful, I am bleeding. And therefore the west wind should lift him up. He continues to say that a heavy weight of ours has chained and bowed, that a heavy weight of ours, the time in this life, has chained and bowed him. "One too like thee." He says that I was a person in my boyhood days, I was one who was like you, but time and this life has chained and bowed him down. He was also tameless and swift and proud like the west wind. He was tameless, uncontrollable, and swift and moving very fast, and he was proud of himself. So he was a person like the west wind. He shared the qualities of the west wind in his boyhood hours. But now life has chained him and made him bow down to the west wind, urging the west wind to lift him up. Thus we see that after describing the activities of the west wind on the earth, on the leaves, and the clouds in the sky, and the waves in the sea, the poet turns to himself and then identifies his own self with that of the west wind. He recalls his boyhood days when he was swift, energetic, and uncontrollable like the west wind. And now he feels and how he felt as a boy, that he could accompany the west wind while it was wandering in the sky, flying in the sky. And he says that the adversities of life have crushed him now. He has been defeated and he is bleeding as he is falling on the thorns of life, the difficulties of life, the sorrows of life. And he needs an inspiration from the west wind because he feels powerless and helpless as an adult. He therefore appeals to the west wind to uplift him, to elevate him to a new consciousness, which he wishes to share with the world. The poet shifts his attention from the effect of west wind on the earth, sky, and the ocean to himself. He contrasts himself with the west wind and wants to be like a leaf which is lifted by the west wind. He also yearns to share the spirit of the west wind, the spirit of nature. He wishes to be like a dead leaf, a cloud, and a wave which are lifted by the west wind. He wishes to be like a wave which is pushed to the shore by the west wind. He says that he is in a very despairing condition and hopes to be free from the bondage of life on this earth. O lift me as a wave, a leaf, a cloud. I fall upon the thorns of life, I bleed, is the most memorable couplet or phrase of the poem which is oft quoted. He says that he is being weighed down by time and the circumstances in his life, and he is suffering, and he needs mercy from the west wind. He cries out to the west wind to relieve him from this suffering by lifting him up and carrying him away from the difficulties. Thank you. Hello everyone. Ode to the West Wind by P.B. Shelley. We are going to analyze the fifth canto of this ode. Here in this ode, Shelley makes a passionate appeal or plea to the west wind and expresses his desire to be one with the west wind. He writes, "Make me thy lyre, even as the forest is." He wishes that the west wind, or he appeals to the west wind to make him its lyre. Lyre is a musical instrument or an acolyte. He wishes that the west wind should make Shelley his lyre or an acolyte, even as the forest is. Even as the forest is means like the west wind has made the forest its musical instrument, or we can listen to the sound of the west wind in the forest when it blows. What if my leaves are falling like its own? He says that it does not matter whether my leaves are also falling like the leaves of the forest. The tumult of thy mighty harmonies will take from both a deep autumnal tone. He says that the tumult, the commotion of thy mighty harmonies, thy west winds, mighty, strong, harmonies, melodies. The melodies, the melodious song of the west wind when it flows through the forest will take from both a deep autumnal tone. Will take from both means the forest and the wind, a deep tone of autumn. Sweet though in sadness. He says that this tone or this sound of autumn is though sad, but it is sweet. As we have already seen that the season of autumn is associated with the falling of leaves and falling of temperature. So it is not at all a comfortable season. But Shelley calls it sweet because only after death life can come. New leaves on the trees and plants, new flowers will come only when the old leaves and old plants die. Be thou spirit fierce. Be thou, be you. Again he is addressing the west wind. Be you spirit fierce. Fierce, powerful, fearful spirit, my spirit. He wishes that the spirit of autumn should become his own spirit. Be thou me. Be you me. He urges the west wind to become his own self. Impetuous one. Impetuous, vigorous, arduous wind. He urges the wind to be him. He wants to become one with the west wind. Drive my dead thoughts over the universe. He tells the west wind to drive his dead thoughts over the universe. He wishes to do away with his old thoughts, like withered leaves, to quicken a new birth. Like the west wind carries away the withered, dead, dried leaves in order to quicken the birth of new leaves and flowers. He says that Shelley says that, like the leaves of the autumn forest, his thoughts are also dead, and he wishes them to be vitalized by the west wind and by the incantation of this verse. Incantation, chanting, and by the chanting of this verse, that is his appeal which he has made to the west wind through this poem. Scatter. Scatter is spread far away, as from an unextinguished hearth. Like from an unextinguished hearth. Hearth is a furnace which is not extinguished. Ashes and sparks. Ashes and sparks come out from a hearth or a furnace which is not fully extinguished or blown out. My words among mankind. He tells the west wind to scatter his prophetic words amongst mankind, to all the human beings, like from a fiery furnace. He says that the furnace of his heart is also not fully extinguished, and sparks and ashes come out, can still come out. That is, new ideas can still come out from his own heart and mind, and he wishes the west wind to spread it far and wide. Be through my lips to unawakened earth the trumpet of a prophecy. He tells the west wind to act as a trumpet of a prophecy of coming good days through his lips, and spread this message, take this message to the unawakened earth, to the people who are sleeping, that is, who are not fully aware of life. He wishes that the west wind should become a trumpet, a musical instrument, and announce to the sleepy and this indifferent world that certainly a glorious future, a good future, will come after the present era of gloom and sadness. In the last two lines, he gives what is the prophecy. O wind, if winter comes, can spring be far behind? If winter comes, then spring cannot stay far behind. Spring will come just after the winter season. The winter season stands for suffering and affliction, and the spring season stands for happiness, joy, and prosperity. So, when the winter comes, when suffering comes to humanity, happiness and joy also follows it. Thus, we see that in the beginning of this canto, the poet wishes that the west wind should bring out the prophetic notes hidden in his own mind by playing on the poet's mind as if he were the lyre or acolyte of the west wind. And he says that in a manner in which the west wind brings out the latent or the hidden music from the trees in the forest, it should also bring out the hidden ideas in the mind of the poet. He says that, like the forest, he is presently seeing the autumn of his era, and he wishes the west wind to become one with him and help him to scatter his thoughts over the world in order to become the harbinger of a new period of prosperity and development. He says that he is in a miserable condition and the world is also in a miserable condition, and he must give place to a happier and brighter new order. He expresses his idealism in the last line, and he believes in the perfectibility of human nature. Thus, we see that in this stanza, beginning with making him as his lyre or acolyte, he urges the west wind to be one with him. Be thou spirit fierce, my spirit, be thou me, impetuous one. And he wants the wind to help him to drive away the dead thoughts from over the world in order to bring a new humanitarian universal order. Comparing his thoughts with the dead leaves which the west wind blows, and also the leaves, in order to quicken a new birth. He thus praise the west wind to spread this message of his, that spring will come after the winter is over. There is no doubt about it. He wishes that the people of England should be optimistic because, according to him, winter indicates the dark times in England of his times, and spring indicates a very bright future for the people. Thus, we see that in the first three cantos of the poem, Shelley writes about nature, but in the last two cantos, the fourth and the fifth one, he writes about his own expectations from the west wind and what he wishes the west wind, what changes the west wind should bring about in his life, how the west wind should help him to become a more free person, to lift him from the difficulties, the sorrows, the pains of life. And in the fifth canto, he wishes the west wind to spread his message of health and happiness and better times. Thank you. Hello everyone. We are going to discuss the literary or the poetic devices used by P.B. Shelley in his Ode to the West Wind, and also the structure of the West Wind as an ode. As we know that ode is a lyrical poem and a poem that is written for some special occasion, or a poem that speaks to a particular person or a thing. The purpose of an ode is generally to memorize or to celebrate something which is of a great importance or which has a very significant meaning. And the characteristics of an ode are that it is highly solemn and serious in its tone. Its subject matter is also serious, and it is usually written with elaborate patterns of stanzas. Another feature of an ode is its uniform metrical feat, but the poets generally do not strictly follow this rule. But in this ode to the west wind, Shelley has strictly followed the metrical pattern. So we can conclude that ode is a poetic form that can best be described as a song or a poem which is written in praise of celebration of an object or even a place or an experience. It is positive piece of work, and that today need not be written in meter or rhyme, though a poet may choose to use these devices if he or she wishes. Ode to the West Wind is an ode because it is a rhymed lyric. It is also in the form of an address. It has a dignified subject and style. It is also an elaborated, structured poem. It has musicality in it, and it has been divided into 5 cantos. Each cantos has 5 stanzas. The last 2 lines form the couplet, and there are 14 lines in each cantos. Therefore, each is a sonnet made up of 14 lines, and all the stanzas have the same rhyme scheme. So the rhyme scheme of this is A B C, B C B, C D E, D E D, and E E E. Therefore, the form of the poem is consistent in pattern. Because each stanza is 14 lines in strength, uses the same rhyming pattern of ABA, BCB, CDC, DED, and EE. Now, this rhyming scheme is called the Terza Rima, and it was used by Dante in his Divine Comedy. It is an ode because the tone of Shelley in this ode is that of celebration. It includes excitement, pleasure, joy, as well as hope. Shelley draws a parallel between the seasonal cycles of the wind and that of its own ever changing spirit. Here, nature in the form of the wind is presented, according to Abrams, as the outer correspondent to an inner change from apathy to spiritual vitality, and from imaginative sterility to a burst of creative power. So, this poem is about the inspiration that Shelley derives from nature. The breath of autumn being is Shelley's aesthetic version of the Christian Holy Spirit. He does not rely on traditional religion. He focuses his praise around the wind's role in the various cycles of nature, that is, death, regeneration. He calls the wind as preserver as well as destroyer. He begins the poem by praising the wind. Then he personalizes the wind and hopes that it will heed to his plea. He is aware of his own mortality and the immortality of his subject. This drives him to urge the wind that he too can be inspired, and the wind can make him his lyre, and he can be carried, be through my lips to unawakened earth, through land and time. So he moves from objectivity to subjectivity in the end of the ode. It should be noted that in the 3-line Terza Rima stanza, the first and the third lines rhyme and the middle line does not rhyme. But the end sound of that middle line is used as the rhyme for the first and the third lines in the next stanza which follows. The final couplet then rhymes with the middle line of the last 3-line stanza. So we can see that Ode to the West Wind follows the rhyme scheme ABA, BCB, CDC, DED, and EEE. Sorry, double E. Other literary devices used in Ode to the West Wind include alliteration, personification, and apostrophe. Apostrophe is a literary device which refers to a speech or an address to a person who is not present, or to a personified object, like Shelley had done to the west wind. He has personified the west wind. It comes from the Greek word apostrophion, which means to turn away. It is an interesting device that is used when the poet's speaker talks to something or someone that cannot either hear him or can't even respond. In this case, the speaker starts the poem by talking to the west wind. O west wind, as though it can do both. In addition to this, the poet personifies the west wind or even gives it human abilities that forces or animals don't naturally have. So, in the poem, a number of times he calls the west wind, he begins the west wind as O wild west wind. And in the second canto, he addresses it, Thou on whose stream. Again, in the third stanza, he begins, Thou who didst waken from his summer, dreams, the blue Mediterranean. In the fourth canto, he talks to the west wind. He tells it, Oh, lift me as a wave, a leaf, a cloud. I fall upon the thorns of life, I bleed. In the fifth canto, he tells or urges the west wind and says, Be thou spirit fierce, my spirit, be thou me, impetuous one. In the end, he says, Be thou my lips to unawakened earth, the trumpet of prophecy. Thus, we see that he is speaking to the west wind, he has personified the west wind, and he has imagined as if the west wind can listen to him. Another device used in this ode is alliteration. Alliteration is a common repetition that appears when the poet repeats the same consonant sound